and share his screen. I want to introduce Mary Cronin, who is our first speaker. And Mary is a research professor at Boston College and president of 4Q Catalyst and the director of the Center for Aging Entrepreneurship. Alongside her work, Mary offers consulting service, and Mary is the author of Starting Up Smarter: Why Founders Over 50 Build Better Companies. And that is a wonderful, wonderful book in terms of how she has set the scene, taking examples from her interviews, but also combining it with her own research and insights from other people. So just as a brief introduction, we would ask Mary to say something a little bit about her research and the work she's done and see how that can help us get our discussion started today. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Wonderful. Is that my cue?
That's your cue, Mary.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here. Thanks to Brave Starts and Wise Move, and especially Mike, who's been really a guiding light for me in all of the work that I've done over the past several years since I was fortunate enough to get to know Mike. And I'll start by saying, very similarly to starting a new company, when you're thinking about writing a book, really it's a two-part process. You write the book because there's something you really, really need to say and you want to share it with the rest of the world. And you also, in the process of writing a book, find out new things that you didn't know. And it's a process of learning. And for me, Starting Up Smarter: Why Founders Over 50 Build Better Companies was both of those things. And I'd like to take just a few minutes to share not so much the research, but the learnings and the insights that I gained in talking to so many entrepreneurs over 50 in the process of creating the book. So as Ingen already said, there's a lot of research that says statistically, the data shows that if you're over 50, you are more likely to start a successful company than if you're in your 20s. Despite all the media, despite all the spotlights on young founders, a study in the US of 2.7 million founders who started a company and went on to hire at least one employee showed that if you were 63 years old when you started that company, you are 10 times more likely to have a successful company 5 years later than if you were in your 20s. Wow. That is not a widely appreciated piece of data. If you are between the ages of 53 and 60, you are 4 times more likely to be successful and start a high growth company than if you start as a founder in your 20s, in your early 20s specifically. So that's the kind of data that I wanted to share in the book, because I feel that despite that reality, the word is not yet widely appreciated, that we, those of us on this screen and in this movement, are likely to succeed if we do have an entrepreneurial mindset and if we do go ahead and start a company. I knew that before I wrote the book. That was my motivation, to share that kind of information. Also, another thing that I knew before writing the book was a lot of great studies on how people over 50, quite aside from their entrepreneurial instincts, want to make a difference in the world. That is a period of time when we begin to think about our legacy. What are we going to do to make the world a better place? What are we going to leave behind? Not necessarily material goods, but in terms of the changes we're able to make, the good things we're able to accomplish. And there's a very strong drive at this period of our lives to make a difference and to leave a lasting impact. And so those two pieces of research, those two insights based on data, help us to answer the why. Why do founders over 50 build better companies? They do, in part because of this purpose, this desire to make a difference in the world. And it's hard. Those of you who are with us and will contribute to the discussion today are going to probably share the challenges that are involved in being a founder, in being an entrepreneur. It's not easy. It doesn't matter what your age is. It's not easy to start and operate and grow a business. There's a lot of challenges that come your way. And when you're over 50 and you have a purpose, that comes with perseverance, that comes with grit and determination. And that's what I learned and was so inspired to learn talking to so many founders for Starting Up Smarter. I'll give you just a few examples and how this all fits together. So Jeffrey Harris was a vegan when he was 14 years old. He dropped out of college and he went to India to learn how to meditate, to learn about Eastern philosophy. He came back in his 20s and he thought it would be the best thing in the world to start a vegan restaurant combined with a bookstore with readings in philosophy and maybe some music on the side. And he teamed up with a peer of his age and went around trying to get this restaurant started. And as he says himself, I was a total failure. I didn't know anything about running a restaurant. Nobody would even talk to me or never mind fund me. But that vision that Jeffrey had kept with him when he went into a more traditional career in sales. And when he got near 60, he said to himself, world, if this is ever going to happen, if there's going to be a vegan fast food restaurant that's like the next McDonald's, but it's going to help save the planet by reducing animal cruelty and all the other things that I care about in my life, I've got to do it. How am I going to do this? I'm going to reach out. I'm going to look for other people to do it with me. And I'm not going to take no for an answer. Now he has co-founded something called Plant Power Fast Food, which has already opened 10 vegan restaurant chains in the US and has raised already $10 million in funding to get him to his vision of becoming the next McDonald's, but with kindness and vegan fast food. So another story, Paul Tasner got laid off when he was in his mid-60s. Quite a surprise after a 40-year successful career in supply chain management. And he was far from ready from retirement. And he had a vision based on his own experience, which might resonate with a lot of us. He couldn't open the darn plastic electronic things that he and his wife bought. It was so hard to get the package open. And he said, not only is plastic one of the worst pollutants on the planet, but this is a problem I really feel called to solve. And I'm going to start a company to solve it using all recycled products and paper-based pulp material wrapping instead of plastic. He got turned down. Paul asked for venture funding, angel funding, any funding. He got turned down almost 100 times. No one would fund a first-time founder who was in his mid-60s. Apparently, they didn't read the data. And so he said, I'm going to keep going, change my business model, and ask the suppliers who are going to make the non-plastic recyclable packaging to fund me. And he did. And 10 years, 11 years later, in his mid-70s, he's still in business, very profitable company, really making a difference in the world by reducing the amount of plastic waste. One more story, and this is another why. when we're over 50, we have rich, deep human connections. Now they call them social networks, but I call them friendships and connections and important relationships. And we have more of them as we get older, and we know how to grow those relationships. And we also have expertise. And another founder that I featured in my book, Wendy Gutterson, she had a career in healthcare management. She had a crisis in health in her own family, in her own life, and a very unsatisfactory series of interactions with physicians who were so busy taking the electronic notes during her visit that they couldn't even look her in the eye. And she knew, and they knew, that that was not a good thing for the world or for health or for well-being. And Wendy, in her 50s, left her career path in hospital management and started her own consulting company. And she told me, I sat alone in my home office for a year thinking, I've left my job. I want to change healthcare. I want to change how doctors can relate to patients. And I have the expertise, and I just have to keep going. And again, 8 years later, Wendy has employed over 25 people. She has served over 150 healthcare practices in the United States, and all of her business is grown by word of mouth, referrals. She didn't decide to become a Facebook advertising whiz. She decided to do the work that she set out to do by talking to her friends and getting referrals and using her expertise to solve problems that she knew physicians were facing. So my insight here, to wrap up, is that yes, it is hard to start a company, but we over 50 are good at it. We are likely to be successful, and the assets we have to bring are that we have a purpose, we have persistence and resilience, we don't take no for an answer, we look for other solutions when we run up against barriers, and we have a deep expertise and network that we can bring to solving problems. And when we put all those things together, we are going to be happier, more fulfilled, and have the impact in the world that we set out to have. So that's why I'm so excited to be here with so many powerful, expert people and to join in the rest of the discussion and conversation today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. That's a great. The takeaways in terms of having a sense of purpose, the determination, the networks, and the looking for solutions, I think really are key elements. One of the things, just before we move on, there was a question from Despina from Dow, and I remember reading it in your book. There was, in terms of access for finance and how venture capitals looked more towards younger founders and older people, and there's often an age cutoff that just has no logic really, but is a barrier for people. That's something that I think people really have to use their networks to try and find creative ways of getting finance to start. But didn't know if you wanted to say something real quick about that before we move to Han.
Yes, it's true that you will not be very likely to get venture capital if you are an older founder. That's a very sad reality. And I'm working to try to change that reality. And I think many of us here today are also working to try to change that reality because it flies in the face of data. In the meantime, most of the founders that I work with and talk to for the book find ways to get started and bootstrap themselves. And then when they have a proof of concept, when their business is off the ground, they often can raise funding, but not as easily in that early stage. So be prepared to look for alternatives, and those can be friends and family, those can be former business partners, or those can be bootstrapping with your own co-founders.
But it's not to put a downer on the positive message. I think the fact that people are so resourceful, have a sense of determination, really just shows that they take this challenge in stride. But it is out there as well.